Hello everyone. In this video I will discuss one of the films called Sunshine, and never forget that I always pray for you and your family to be happy and healthy always. It is narrated that in the year 2050, the sun had begun to dim due to running out of nuclear fusion reactions. This put the Earth at risk of returning to a new ice age due to the significant decrease in temperature. After thorough research, world scientists concluded that they could likely reignite the sun using a nuclear fusion bomb with a mass equivalent to that of Manhattan Island. For this purpose, several experienced astronauts led by Captain Pinbacker were sent on a mission to reignite the sun using the Icarus I spacecraft, equipped with the most advanced heat shield to prevent the spacecraft from burning due to exposure to solar storms. Unfortunately, after passing the orbit of Mercury, the Icarus I spacecraft suddenly disappeared mysteriously, without ever knowing the cause. 7 years after the disappearance of the Icarus I spacecraft, world scientists sent another 8 astronauts to carry out the same mission using the Icarus II spacecraft. This spacecraft was not much different from its predecessor, also equipped with an anti-heat shield and advanced intelligence programs to support the mission's sustainability. The astronauts consisted of a nuclear physicist named Robert Capa, who would be responsible for the success of the bomb launch, James Mace as the chief engineer, and a botanist named Corazon, responsible for maintaining the garden inside the spacecraft to provide sufficient oxygen supply during the mission. In short, after traveling for 16 months, Kaneda, acting as the captain of the spacecraft, informed the crew that they would soon enter a solar storm known as the Death Zone. When they entered this area, communication signals with the Earth would be permanently cut off, giving the crew only a few hours to send their final messages to their families on Earth. During his turn, Capa struggled to find the right words to convey to his family, inadvertently spending too much time sending his message, which angered Mace and led to a fight between them. Fortunately, the crew quickly broke up the argument, and Dr. Searle, serving as the psychologist, gave Mace time to enter the Earth Room, a special chamber that could provide a realistic simulation of anything on Earth. Meanwhile, Dr. Searle, in the observation room, appeared quite curious about the sensation of direct sunlight without using a filter, so he asked the spacecraft's computer system to adjust the filter settings to only tolerate 3.1% of the actual sunlight. On the other hand, Captain Kaneda was seen examining Captain Pinbacker's journal video from Icarus I. In it, Pinbacker recounted a small meteor storm that caused some damage to the spacecraft compartments, but strangely, Pinbacker referred to the incident as something beautiful. Along with this, Icarus II began to approach Mercury's orbit, and surprisingly, Harvey, who was responsible for communications, suddenly intercepted a distress signal from Icarus I. The signal was weak enough to be captured, leading the crew to conclude that it was likely the iron content on Mercury that allowed them to pick up the signal. Consequently, some of the crew believed that there might still be survivors aboard Icarus I. Because according to mathematical calculations, considering the resources available on the spacecraft, this assumption was not entirely implausible. They began to debate whether the current mission should be altered to investigate the signal sent by Icarus I. Mace objected to this idea because it could be very dangerous and could potentially jeopardize the success of their current mission. However, Dr. Searle had a different opinion. He believed that if they checked Icarus I first, they would have an additional bomb, which could be very advantageous if the first bomb launch failed. In the end, this debate led Captain Kaneda to leave the decision to Capa, who was considered to have a better understanding of all the possibilities. Initially, Capa himself had difficulty making a decision, but after performing some mathematical calculations, he ultimately agreed with Searle's opinion, because he believed that they would be much better off having 2 chances rather than just one. Unfortunately, during the journey to Icarus I, Trey, who was the navigator and also responsible for controlling the spacecraft's trajectory, admitted to forgetting to adjust the position of the heat shield to a new angle. This caused the spacecraft to experience jolts due to being exposed to the heat of the solar storm before the Icarus intelligence system took over control to adjust the shield angle. Therefore, After calming Trey, who felt very guilty for his negligence, Captain Kaneda and Kappa then used their EV suit settings to repair some damaged spacecraft shield panels. Meanwhile, Cassie, along with several other crew members, prepared in the control room to try to direct the heat shield to support the repairs being done by Kappa and Kaneda. Unfortunately, when the crew cheered happily because Kaneda and Kappa successfully repaired one shield panel, suddenly one of the communication towers exposed to the heat of the sun caught fire, quickly spreading to the garden room and burning almost all the plants there. This incident prompted the Icarus intelligence system to take over control of the shield in an attempt to return it to its position, which of course could cause Kappa and Kaneda to be burned alive. Realizing this, Cassie attempted to regain control of the shield, but the Icarus intelligence system refused the request, deeming the spacecraft to be in danger. With no other choice, Cassie immediately initiated the ID code protocol to take control of Icarus, but this protocol required a second code from the other crew members on board the spacecraft. Initially, Cassie asked for Mace's code, but Mace immediately refused it because he believed mission success was far more important than losing 2 crew members. Surprisingly, this decision was also endorsed by Captain Kaneda, as sending the payload to the Sun was the top priority for all the crew. With the movement of the shield position, Kaneda asked Kappa to save himself and hand over the final repair task to him. Eventually, Kappa hurriedly went to the shield's safe side, while Kaneda managed to fix the last panel just before being burned by the sun's heat.
Captain, it's right on! You have to move now!
Final panel closing. The shield is secure.
You have to move now! You have to move! Why isn't it moving?
This incident left Trey feeling immensely guilty, prompting Dr. Searle to immediately place him in isolation after diagnosing Trey with suicidal tendencies. Meanwhile, as the oxygen supply on Icarus 2 began to deplete, the crew had no choice but to continue toward Icarus 1 in hopes of obtaining oxygen supplies to carry out their main mission. In short, they finally reached Icarus 1. Dr. Searle, Kappa, Mace, and Harvey immediately inspected the interior of the spacecraft through the airlock connector. Surprisingly, they found sufficient food, oxygen gardens, and the bomb payload still intact. However, unfortunately, there were some damages to the computer server that prevented Icarus 1 from being flown back. There, they also discovered another video journal from Captain Pinbacker, revealing that the dying sun was the will of God, and no human could change that fate. In addition to finding the strange video from Pinbacker, they also discovered the bodies of the Icarus 1 crew who had died, burned in the observation room. When they further investigated, a sudden jolt occurred, caused by the destruction of the connecting airlock, mysteriously separating the 2 spacecraft. This event naturally caused panic among the crew, prompting them to rush to save themselves. Unfortunately, they found only one EV suit, which was then handed over to Kappa. Because Mace and Searle agreed that Kappa was the most crucial person for the bomb launch, Searle decided to stay inside Icarus 1 to manually open the valve. Meanwhile, Mace and Harvey hurriedly donned the internal protective layers of the spacecraft to shield their bodies in an attempt to leap to Icarus 2. This effort ultimately saved Kappa and Mace, but not Harvey, who lost his grip and subsequently froze to death in space. Meanwhile, Searle, inside Icarus 1, entered the observation room to prepare for his impending death, bathed in the heat of the sun just as Icarus 2 moved away. On the other hand, Mace expressed his suspicion to the remaining crew about the sabotaged connecting airlock, suspecting Trey initially as the perpetrator. However, the issue they were facing was not only who had sabotaged it, but also the remaining oxygen capacity on the spacecraft. According to Corazon's calculations, at least to complete the mission, the remaining oxygen can only support 4 out of the 5 remaining crew members, which means Trey is a burden they must eliminate. Although this is a tough decision, for the success of the mission and the future of humanity, The crew agrees to sacrifice Trey's life, with Mace as the executor. However, when Mace goes to do it, he finds that Trey has already committed suicide. This instantly leads Mace to blame Kappa for all the deaths. As if Kappa hadn't diverted the mission, none of these events would have happened. They engage in a brief fight, which soon stops as they begin to struggle to breathe. Sometime later, when Kappa is doing calculations in the cargo room, he is startled by a confession from the Icarus intelligence system, claiming that the current air conditions do not allow them to survive until the mission is completed. Because there is actually an unknown fifth person currently in the observation room. This confuses Kappa because the crew should have been counted as 4 people after Trey was found dead. So he rushes to the observation room and is immediately shocked to see a figure covered in burns, realizing that it's Captain Pinbacker. Unfortunately, as Kappa was admiring this encounter, Pinbacker suddenly attacked and inflicted wounds on Kappa's body. Fortunately, Kappa quickly escaped to the EV suit room and locked Pinbacker inside. Unfortunately, before leaving, Pinbacker also managed to lock the EV suit room door from the outside, trapping Kappa inside. On the other hand, Corazon discovered a small sprout from the remains of the burned garden, giving her new hope to complete the mission. Therefore, she immediately called for Kappa and Cassie, intending to inform them of this, but unfortunately, this action inadvertently attracted Pinbacker's arrival, who promptly killed Corazon from behind. Afterwards, Pinbacker sabotaged the spacecraft's computer server in the cooling room, causing the entire Icarus 2 system to shut down completely, similar to what he did on Icarus 1. Knowing that all systems of the spacecraft were down, Mace went to the server cooling room to attempt repairs. This endeavor was quite challenging, as Mace had to dive into the cooling pool, the temperature of which could freeze his body. Fortunately, after enduring the crazy effort to withstand the cold temperature, Mace finally managed to restart the spacecraft system and briefly instructed Kappa to continue the mission before succumbing to freezing after his leg got trapped by the server mainframe. On the other hand, Kappa, upon hearing this, immediately donned his EV suit and then punctured the locked door. He then tethered himself to the room's wall before opening the airlock to give himself access to the spacecraft's separation system. After observing Mace's frozen body, Kappa proceeded to initiate the spacecraft separation procedure into 2 parts. One part would be discarded, while the other part, containing the nuclear fusion bomb with the heat shield, would continue its journey toward the sun's surface. After the separation, Kappa braved himself to jump to the front section of Icarus to ensure the bomb would detonate properly. Upon reaching the bomb payload room, Kappa was surprised by Cassie's presence, who was sitting quietly. However, when Kappa approached her, Pinbacker suddenly reappeared and attempted to attack Kappa. Fortunately, Cassie, who was still alive, immediately assisted Kappa by pushing him to the other side of the bomb's surface, successfully separating them from Pinbacker's threat. With the remaining time, Kappa hurried to the cargo room to activate the nuclear fusion bomb, which ultimately exploded just as the payload reached the sun's surface. This effort resulted in Kappa, Cassie, and Pinbacker's deaths due to the explosion. In the end, Kappa's sacrifice and efforts succeeded in reigniting the sun and gradually warming the Earth, just as his earlier message was received by his sister. And that's it for the story series of this film. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to support this channel by subscribe, like and share. See you in the next video. Goodbye.